Hi, everyone. I am here to give a review on Woman King. Think it's like, this is better. Okay, so let's start with a reaction that I had to it. I actually felt that I couldn't understand who this film was for. So I kept asking myself as I was watching it, who is this for? Who is this written? Who's the audience? I'm not sure when they were putting this film together that they had a clear idea as to who this was supposed to be for, if it was supposed to if it's supposed to inspire who, if it's supposed to tell this story, tell it to who, you know and I say that because that really kind of begins to start shielding my perspective on how this movie was going. And I the more that I process it, because at first there are some good parts and there are some things that starts a conversation, but the more that I process it, the more that I'm thinking of it, I'm going back and forth. And I know that Twitter right now has a hashtag boycott um, Woman King. So, and I think part of this is because it's complex. I don't think it's a bad movie. Also don't think it's a good movie. I think that the marketing of this was trying to be a very inspirational movie that was supposed to be similar into the same vein as a Black Panther. And another Black Panther is a fictional character and it is a Marvel superhero, but it did provide a level of inspiration and thought. However, this movie does not do that. And if you are supposed to be inspired, you're inspired about what? If you're supposed to be proud, what am I proud about? For so let me walk you through. And look, I'm gonna try to say some of these names, so y'all just gonna have to forgive me. Um, so it starts off. So first of all, let me preface this. The entire the if you were to look at the preview for this film so that you can be interested in this movie, the thing that really bugs me the most of it is that they used a a song, I think it's called Power, um, on uh the Lion King's uh Beyonce album. And so I anticipated, and I was kind of hyped. I was like, okay, I'm gonna go into this listening to Beyonce's album, and because I really do like that album, I think it's high, or Black is King, which is the visual album to that, and I was already in. I was there, and then I was like, and then the whole entire movie, y'all don't use Beyonce song at all. Like, so that really, I was like, oh, so I'm annoyed off the rip. We're not using Beyonce song at all. So I'm gonna let you know right now, um, the Woman King people, I'm gonna need y'all to not put a song, not use Beyonce for your advertisement and then turn around and not use her in your movie. Number one. Okay, so now that I got that out the way, we have a a okay, so I'm gonna go with the cast. Okay. This is supposed to be about the Dahomey people, in the 1820s. And it is supposed to be about particularly looking at the female regiment of the Dahomey people's military, right? And the Viola Davis role is the centerpiece, and she is the leader of these women. And they had some, I will admit, they had a very dynamic cast. The women were beautiful. I loved that incredibly. The thing that I did not like was John Boyega, who was the king. I hated his role. Like, I didn't like him at all. Not him as the role, but like him as the actor playing it. It just didn't work for me, and it took me out every single time. So there's that. And I struggled with this movie because it, number one, we know that women across the board has been not treated fairly when it comes to, it doesn't matter if it's pre-European invasion into Africa or a post. Women have not always been treated as respectfully as a whole. Okay. So with that being said, I acknowledge that, but I struggled with trying to figure out what level of, is this something that would have really happened, or is this something that you are trying to imagine that this would kind of happen? And so I really struggle with that. And I also struggle quite a bit because what they're really focusing on, and what part of this struggle that I had as a whole is, am I to believe that as a warrior like the Viola Davis character, am I supposed to believe as a warrior that these women weren't captured at one point and that they weren't raped? Of course, that probably absolutely happened. And I'm quite sure that raping women is something that, especially captured women, is something that took place. Absolutely. But the thing that I'm not sure about is, how necessary is it that they would like to demonstrate this part of the story in the way that they did? Because it really begins to start feeding into this narrative of how Europeans wrote about African men or Africans, and especially men, being barbarians. And so even just that little demonstration of this it seems like it's not trying to it doesn't seem, the movie doesn't seem like it's demonstrating an evaluation of these people's story inside group, demonstrating an inside look at the story, as much as it's looking outside in of this story by perpetuating this concept of barbarianism. We told you that they're barbarians, and so let me give you a piece of this barbarianism. And then it also perpetuates, one of the things that none of the previews showed is that this is directly tied into slavery. And they purposely kind of hid that part of the story because they knew they wanted to amp up the strength of these women, as if we're supposed to be pro woman, but also forgetting that this pro woman story is entangled of enslavement. the Dahomey people sold slaves for 200 years. And then they grow a conscience, even a debate amongst themselves as to whether we should just continue to keep into the slave trade or we're not going to keep into the slave trade. And then so we're cheering that they held off imperialism for a short while, yet they're already being the effects of imperialism because you've been entering the trade with them for quite some time. So there's imperialism for 200 years. So there's imperialism wrapped into the fact that you're slave, that not only are you, what you would have done if they weren't here, Europeans and Americans weren't here, is that you would have captured your tribal people and you would have intersold each other. And it wasn't wrapped up into uh, this globalized slave trade. But when these white folks landed on your shore, you decided to trade with them people and spread them out around the world for wealth. So imperialism is embedded into this. And then for you to make this statement, King, that you're that this young man who comes here because he comes here, he's a former slave with this white man from Spain, and his mother is a member of the Dahomey tribe, and she wanted him to come see his people. And so the king's like, well, you are home. Oh, so you're home. You may not have sold his mother, but his mother was sold a part of a system that you're contributing to. And in fact, there's a moment that you are trying to give 20 of your own people off so that they can be traded off and sold. So I'm sorry. I don't, there are no good characters in this. None at all. And there are moments that I did feel something, and I'm not, during some of the battles, and I was like, oh, I'm feeling something, and I get that, because you always want to cheer for the Black folks. But I'm also realizing, and so I again, who is this for? And so if you're trying to demonstrate a part of the story that, if you're trying to demonstrate a part of the story that slavery is not just white people getting involved and contributing to this global international slave trade that has perpetuated white supremacy around the world. Okay. And if you're trying to say that Black folks contributed to this globalization of white supremacy through selling their country people, fine. However, it doesn't absolve you from your involvement and from what you did, Europeans and Americans. And so that's part of the problem that I have. Uh, however, I like I said, I struggle with the movie. I don't think, and here's another aspect of this movie that really boils over to me, is that if you look online, the analysis of the movie always starts with one writer's name, and her name is Gina Prince Bythewood. And they intentionally keep using her name because she's the Black woman. And she's the Black woman who did Love and Basketball, I love. She did a few other, she did Disappearing Acts. I actually kind of liked it. The Secret Lives of Bees. That's okay. She did Beyond the Lights. mm, Not, not the greatest. The Old Guard. That I do not remember, so forgive me. And she went to UCLA. So, with all that being said, her name is. Let me see. Let me see if I can. Oh, she did A Different World. Okay, I love South Central. It only had one season. She did Bernie Mac. She did Girlfriends. Everybody Hates Chris. Everybody Hates Chris is okay for me. Cloak and Dagger. Eek. I didn't like that at all. Women of the Movement. No, I loved Women of the Movement for sure. For sure. Um, I don't know what this. Let me see. Let me click on the Old Guard. Let me see if I. Oh, I loved the Old Guard. Oh, that was a good role for her. I wonder if they're gonna do a sequel. Oh, they are doing a sequel, but she's not doing the sequel. Oh, they have somebody else doing the sequel. Oh, or maybe she's writing the sequel. Oh, that's cool. Anyway, that's not the point. So they're putting her name out there, and constantly, and and part of that putting her name out there is specifically so that she doesn't, so that the backlash won't be so severe, because they're not attaching the other writer's name to it, Dana Stevens. And Dana Stevens is a white woman. And let's see what Dana Stevens has done. Um, I know none of these movies, so I can't help you with that. Um, I literally know. Who is her husband? Because I mean, they both went to UCLA, but I mean, her resume is really thin. Oh, oh, she's making it because of her father, her husband. Her husband's dead. He died last year, and her husband has an absolute, very, very extensive, very extensive resume. He also directed a James Bond movie. Okay, so she was much younger, much younger than her husband. And yeah, no, her career is not. Let's pull up her career. Yo, I don't understand how uh, no, I'm gonna be shady with this. Her credits is very okay, her credits is very short in comparison to this black woman who did absolutely a ton of work, and she's done hardly any work. Ain't that about something? I guess. Anyway, I don't know it. I mean, I think I'm pretty, I shouldn't be astounded because this happens quite a bit, that this black woman has done above and beyond a lot of work, and Dana Stevens has done hardly anything, and they're on the same level. So there's I think I'm kind of taken aback. I think I am. I'm not surprised. I shouldn't be surprised, but I am kind of taken aback. But anywho, um, she think, but see, this is her project. initially from what it seems as if. And she got this Black woman to kind of come on to it. And if you watch it, it makes a lot of sense that this would be her baby and not Gina's baby. I'm not trying to give excuses for Gina, but this is definitely much more of a white lens than it is a Black lens at um, and I struggle with it. I struggle with the perpetuation of stereotypes that are still in this film. I struggle with the the attempt to absolve white people, Europeans and Americans from their from the slave trade by trying to excuse it as this by trying to incorporate Black folks in it. I struggle with the fact that they have this scroll at the top that tries to give us the setting, and then they don't put a scroll at the end to tell us, well, what happened to the Dahomey people? I'm gonna tell you what happened to the Dahomey people. The Europeans came again after the Dahomey people came and Dahomey people forced the Spaniards out. The French came. Hmm. The French came and wiped them out. And the land that they now sit on is it took over 100+ years for Black folks to gain their liberation of that area. And then, and it's been civil war and 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 everything. And I actually had, and they still speak French. So, I think you should put that scroll at the end if you're gonna put that scroll at the beginning. And my last thing about all of this is there is going to always be this love thing. They're supposed the women, this tribe is not supposed to be with men. They're not supposed to have relationships and not supposed to bear children. Fine. This little girl looks at this Black boy whose uh whose mother was a slave. He probably was a slave, but his father was white. His mother was a slave. Here comes this light-skinned fellow, and he likes this really beautiful young lady, and she likes him, and he helps her out because he eventually buys her. Yeah, I'm telling you a bit of a spoil, but this man wants her to go to Europe where he is going to protect her. Hmm. And that the epitome of the fact that he wants her to get on a boat and leave Africa and go to Europe for his protection because he thinks that he's going to be able to protect her. And the second thing that is, if we're going to say mind blowing and frustrating above all, let's get the last thing of this is that when the slaves um, kill all the white people, well, the informally enslaved, the Africans kill all the white people, and they let him go, and then these men turn around and was like, you need to get on this boat and you need to go because you can't stay here. The problem that I have with this is you think that he would not be welcome back in Africa? Like his people would not be. Why would you think that he needs to leave Africa and go back to Europe? That he wouldn't be safe and protected here? It was like he wasn't given. Granted, he absolutely wanted to go, I'm sure, but the notion, the words that were said, like it's not safe for you here. You mean to tell me that he wouldn't have been able to go back to the king and be safe in the Dahomey tribe? And that is an out of place sentence. And and honestly, it's the reason why all of this is out of place and it doesn't feel right. And it's a lot of this is woefully inaccurate. And I get all that. Because this movie wasn't made for us. This movie was made for a wide stream audience to make people feel lighter about their ancestors being involved in the slave trade. So, because their argument is if you're willing to sell your own countryman to these strangers, then that's your fault that you're willing to sell these countrymen to your strangers. And it is your responsibility not to sell your fellow countrymen to these strangers who come to the shore, because you know what? You wanted money. You wanted whatever money is, whatever that currency is, either guns or whatever. You wanted the tipping of the balance in order to be stronger than your other fellow countrymen and contributing to the war amongst the nations, amongst the tribes. That's your fault. And that's essentially what this movie is trying to tell us. And so I'm not necessarily saying boycott the movie, but I'm saying that you go into this movie with a side eye. And you go into the movie first off saying, why did you use Beyonce to sell your movie and then not use Beyonce? You already are tripped up. You're bamboozled. And so I do find that this movie is a bamboozle. And it's a betrayal because it's trying to get the same feeling. They encapsulated that we're supposed to feel the same way that we felt about Black Panther. And I'm gonna let you know, in the words of Malcolm X, you've been bamboozled and you have been had.